In Denmark, there is a coastal city called Aarhus. Tidy and neat. Nothing too remarkable or out of the norm until 2012. The local police department receives a phone call from a desperate set of parents. Their teenage son has gone missing. Days later, they receive yet another phone call from another set of desperate parents. Their teenager has gone missing. And then they receive another call and another. Within months, 27 are reported missing, vanished without a trace. Quickly, the police department uncover a chilling reason for this rash of sudden disappearances: the radicalization of Muslim teenagers. Now, in 2012, Syria's civil war was giving rise to radical Islamist groups, and with it, propaganda and promises of a better future for those who felt victims of Islamophobia. All across Europe, thousands of teenagers were running away from home to fight in this war. And these European countries responded by prosecuting suspects, by confiscating documents, by shutting down mosques. Now, here's where the story takes a remarkable turn. Instead of responding with hostility like these other European cities, the police department in Aarhus choose to seek understanding. And so they begin to engage with the Muslim community in Aarhus, one coffee at a time. And here's what they find. Racial profiling in Aarhus is prolific. The sentiment around Islam is aggressive and negative, and its Muslim community feels violently banished by the rest of the city. Now, given this learning, the police department decides to take a different approach to public safety. They set up programs focused on creating a sense of acceptance amongst those who felt other in Aarhus. And this strategy works wonders. So much so that many of the 27 who had run away from Aarhus to go to Syria decide to come back. And instead of being met with hostility upon their return, they are given the medical treatment that they may have needed, are given help to find housing, and help to reintegrate into society. Now, this story reveals so many incredible lessons about human behavior, but there is one in particular that has enraptured me for a couple of years now. And that is what can happen when we come together across lines of difference. But in the grips of fear, anger, and hatred, coming together across lines of difference is seldom the option to which we're drawn. Instead, we choose to isolate ourselves from those who are different. We isolate ourselves politically. Over 60% of the country lives in a landslide county, meaning that the presidential candidate that won in that county won by over 20%. We choose to isolate ourselves racially. 3 out of 4 white Americans do not have a single friend who is non-white. And we choose to isolate ourselves religiously. While there are over 3 million Muslims living in this country, only 1 in 4 Americans have ever met one. Now, I get it. It's scary to engage with difference. After all, when you open up the newspaper, it is so easy to see how violence takes place at these lines of difference. Whether it's police brutality and yet another shooting of an unarmed black civilian, or whether it's terrorism and radicalization, or whether it's the imminent threat of nuclear warfare. It feels safer to incriminate and banish than it feels to sit face to face with those whom we may fear. But our survival of humankind depends upon it. Here's why. Back in the day, tools of destruction were limited to sticks and stones. Fast forward 130,000 years, and we have the bow and arrow. 60,000 years after that, we find metals on the ends of our spears. And 6,000 years later, gunpowder. 500 years after that, TNT. And now, just 100 years later, to this very moment in time, intercontinental ballistic missiles. We are living in an era where, with just the click of a button, hundreds of millions of people could die. Now, luckily, researchers say that one of the greatest ways to increase our compassion is through intimate contact. And if we want humankind to survive, we have to increase the rate of compassion. Our moral restraint is what keeps our destruction in check. So, here is the survival of our species. We urgently have to increase the rate of compassion. And so there's this psychological theory called the intergroup contact theory, which states that the greatest way to scale back hatred, discrimination, and fear is through one moment of intimate contact with someone from a group that we may fear. So I decided to test this theory out for myself. In 2016, I felt so afraid of the hatred that existed on the opposite side of the political spectrum. My parents are immigrants, and my father is from Iran. And this fear was very real in our family. So I was watching the news one night, and a political news reporter was talking about how in Oklahoma, it's one of the most conservative states in our country because since the year 2000, every single county has voted red, choosing its Republican candidate over its Democrat. Knowing I had to do something other than give in to my fear, I decided to drive out to rural Oklahoma, where just 2 months prior, a pig carcass had been dumped right outside of a mosque, a devastating demonstration of religious intolerance. I was petrified of what I would find, but here's what I found instead: hospitality, kindness, friendship. I befriended a much different manifestation of conservative than what I had prepared for. And while I was there, they met a manifestation of Iranian, liberal, cosmopolitan, and millennial that diverged from the narratives that they believed. It was a beautiful moment for us to recognize that we were both so wrong about one another. And actually, what happened after that was that we realized together that the greatest way to scale back hatred is through this intimate contact. So here we are. We urgently have to increase our rate of compassion. But it is hard. It is scary. It is inconvenient. It is uncommon. If we want to increase our compassion exponentially, we have to accelerate the rate at which people can come together safely and intimately with those who are different. Totally. Now, I am a technologist, and I see so many ways that technology is furthering this isolation. But I find hope in what technology is capable of doing, especially in accelerating the speed and rate of coming together across lines of difference. So I started a nonprofit laboratory focused on doing just that. So where do you start when that's your mission? If we wanted to bring people together, we decided we had to start with people. So we launched a public call for stories, and hundreds of people responded. They spanned the religious spectrums, the cultural spectrums, the political spectrums. They identified as developmentally different, as physically disabled, as gender non-conforming. Some were nervous, some were afraid, some were confident. Some were longing for their past, while others were striving for a better future. And yet, many felt other in America. There was CB, a former crystal meth addict. There was Michael, a gender nonconforming writer. There was Abir, a Syrian refugee from Aleppo. There was Nancy, a single mother living on the streets. There was Ben, a schizophrenic and bipolar teenager. There was Marie, a 5-year-old child who just felt other at school. Now, after recording hundreds of individuals, we decided we wanted a way to share this experience in a way that was intimate, in a way that felt real, in a way that felt synchronous. And so we decided to use virtual reality to simulate an eye-gazing experience with this mosaic of American diversity. So when people put on the virtual reality headset, they feel intimately there in front of the other, seeing and being seen. Now, I don't know how many of you have experienced this eye-gazing, but this seemingly simple task requires an incredible amount of vulnerability, because for just a couple of moments, you are seen exactly as you are, for your beauty and for your imperfections. And so, research also says that if you are placed face to face with someone that you may fear, someone that you may hate or disagree with, if you are met with kindness and vulnerability, then you will start to feel the same way in return. It's called mirroring. In the fall, we are embarking upon this 6-month journey around the country to share this experience with isolated communities and to interview 2,000 individuals who represent the wider spectrum of American diversity. And along the way, we will strive to answer one key question, and that is, how do we continue to create understanding across lines of difference when we live in a world that feels so isolated? I don't know all the answers, but I do feel like technology will be an important ingredient. We live in a world today where it is much easier to incriminate and banish because it feels safer that way. We live in a world where responding to the radicalization of Muslim teenagers is practically unheard of. But I think a change is coming. I think that technology can grease the wheels of this transformation from isolation to connection. I believe that technology needs to call out to our courage to come face to face intimately with someone entirely unlike us. And in that moment of profound humanity, we preserve our future. Thank you.